Welcome everyone to our joint press conference with the Clean Energy Freedom, Elected Officials to Protect America, and Clean Energy for America. I'm very happy to see everyone here, and we're very honored to have a distinguished panel of veterans who are concerned about our energy independence and ahead of Independence Day. When I was deployed to the Marine Corps, we came across a line of cars, trucks, and tractors as far as the eye could see. And as dusk, so we couldn't see what they were all lining up with as the dark was coming. And as we got closer, it became very apparent they were lined up because they all wanted fuel for their vehicles. And it really struck me because as the night was falling, we had to break them up because of the curfew. But they were willing to risk their lives and stay in line because of their dependency on a single source of energy. And unfortunately, likewise right now, we are lined up to Putin and other autocratic nations' gas pumps. And we don't have much of a choice right now. But the amazing thing is we have the technology, it exists, we have the ingenuity, and we have the know-how to do this. We just need the political will to get ourselves off of this line to autocratic nations for the oil and gas. And so today we have a number of individuals who have been working at the local, national, and federal and worldwide levels, frankly, and how we can be more energy independent and energy secure. And what it comes in a variety of forms, right? It can come in clean energy technology, clean vehicle technology, and individual solutions within the community, which can be elevated and expanded and scaled rapidly. And the reality is we can't do this by just drilling our way out or building more pipelines or building more LNG facilities. Particularly when you look at Ukraine, Europe needs 500 billion metric tons of gas. We export about 50 to them. And even if we shifted it all the way from Asia into Europe, we'd only be adding about 15 more. We already are at capacity for LNG. The oil and gas industry in the US will not increase capacity because they're too concerned about their high revenues. And they also are saying the excuse, the boom and bust. But the reality is the difference between the gas price here and the price of a barrel of oil has never been greater. So what does that show to tell us? It means that the reality is unless we diversify the energy structure here into clean and renewable energy, we are not going to be able to reduce prices and make our country and the world more secure. So what we're going to highlight here are the individuals working on the front lines with the solutions and really what needs to be scaled to make the world more energy independent. So with that, we'll kick it off with Representative Debbie Serenata. But before that, I want to mention that Sherry Goodman, the former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense. She was supposed to join us, but got called to speak at the NATO summit. And she did want us to mention that she was there and that her book is called Threat Multiplier. And that relates to the multiplying effect of climate change as it relates to burning fossil fuels all the time. She wanted to make sure that everyone knew that, hey, this is a really important thing. And we're happy she's highlighting this issue at the NATO summit. So Representative Debbie Serenata is a New Mexico State Representative, an Air Force veteran, and the EOP National Leadership Council co-chair. So Debbie, please.
Thank you, Alex. Let me tell you a little bit about New Mexico. In New Mexico, spring began with extreme weather events ravaging my state and multiple states around us. Roughly 44% of the America West has been categorized in extreme drought, which is the second highest level of drought, widespread water shortages, and restrictions. One small town in New Mexico, Chama, went weeks without running water. They just got back and running yesterday. In New Mexico, there has been 31 fires since March with over 900,000 acres burned. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, expects to manage triple the number of disasters this year as it did a decade ago. A group of FEMA representatives have been living in New Mexico since April. Thousands in New Mexico have been impacted from extreme heat and deadly fires, and the season has just started. This climate challenge devastates families, livelihoods, and children. People will rebuild, but the fires have left not only burn scars on the land, but scars and traumatic raw emotions that will last throughout many people's lives. Trying to keep up with the effects of climate change on our forests and mountainous areas has been almost impossible. A prescribed burn to help eliminate fires in very dry regions caused our largest fire. Energy independence is critical. We need to move away from our dependence on fossil fuel. And that's a big jump for New Mexico. In New Mexico, 40% of our budget comes from fossil fuel, and it funds education in our state. But we know as a state, in order to survive these catastrophic events, we must move away from the major cause, the use of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are a national security threat that has caused a global climate emergency. The G7 nations meetings in Germany show their resolve to stand united against Putin's Ukrainian war. And I remember that same unification emerged from COP26. I left assured that the leading nations of our planet would meet the challenges of the climate crisis before mass migration and conflicts caused by scarcity of resources accelerated. We're America. We can lead on this issue. First, we must rein in the oil and gas industries that are making billions in profits while everyday citizens' pocketbooks are breaking. These industries report bumper profits, yet without raising the cost of extraction, but increasing the price of gas. These industries not only get a free pass to emit heat-trapping gas that exacerbates extreme weather and climate disasters, they continue to get taxpayer funds. This May, 6 senators introduced a resolution saying that gas and oil companies have engaged in profiteering by using record profits to reward investors and shareholders, rather than to help lower prices at the pump. This non-binding resolution signaled that high-ranking senators view the war in Ukraine and its impact on energy prices as a reason to accelerate the transition to clean energy rather than lock in dependence on fossil fuel, and so do I. A rapid transition to clean and renewable energy is not just necessary for our environment, but it's critical to our economic and national security. In 1940, during World War II, the Lend-Lease Act became law to promote the defense of the United States. At the time, the US produced less than 5% of the world's manufactured goods. But by 1945, it was over 80%. President Biden enacted the Lend-Lease to help Ukraine fight to keep their democracy in the hopes of the free world alive. President Biden, in his vision and brilliance, also invoked the Defense Production Act for clean energy, for solar panels, heat pumps, and electrolyzers for green hydrogen, as well as insulation for buildings. Substantially more investment is needed to set the United States on a path to 50% reduction in carbon pollution by 2030, the goal scientists say is necessary to prevent the worst impact of climate change. The good news is there is legislation for the Senate that would meet that goal. The bill formerly known as the Build Back Better Act was passed by the House last November and would inject $555 billion into clean, renewable infrastructure and grow hundreds of thousands of union jobs. The legislation has been stalled, but it's not too late for the Senate to do the moral thing and join the majority of Americans who take action, in taking action against climate change and enacting legislation that will do so. I signed up to serve and protect my country in the Air Force, and now my state as a public servant. We owe it to the American people to take logical, sensible steps to improve their lives. These climate provisions before the Senate would set the US on the course to meet our greenhouse gas emissions, reduction targets, create millions of good paying jobs, reduce energy costs for consumers, advance environmental justice, invest in climate resilient housing and community infrastructure, and strengthen our economy on the road to energy independence. It's a win-win. Americans need the incentives of this bill to purchase electric vehicles, and car manufacturers need the incentive to ramp up production. It's time for the Senate to act with conviction for the health of our planet, people, democracy, and energy independence. With cars and light-duty vehicles making up 20% of all US gas emissions and 45% of all US oil consumption, we must address the pollution they cause now. I applaud the administration's decision to set stronger clean car standards through 2026, and I hope President Biden will take the next steps in implementing long-term standards to reach a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from new vehicles by 2030. With the Build Back Better climate provision, we won't be ending fossil fuel use, but we will put Americans on a clear path to do so. This legislation will show the world that America can live up to the potential of our country's democratic promise. Our lives and those of our children and grandchildren, our economy, and our national security depend on us meeting the existential threat of the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And it really is a crisis. On the flip side, to the autocratic nations out there like Putin and others, us transitioning to clean energy is an existential threat to them. And so this is where it's an opportunity, right? Because if we allow and have the incentives that have most Americans to buy an electric car, for instance, it's 20% of our emissions. And that's an unbelievable reduction in the amount of oil we are needing to consume. So with that, I'm going to go to Representative Paul Evans, a Oregon State Representative and co-chair of the EOPA Leadership Council.
Thank you. First of all, can everybody hear me? Just want to make sure that the sound is working okay. Today, I really am grateful for the opportunity to join in this discussion. I actually have to leave a little bit early because we're leading work groups, believe it or not, on response to wildfires that are in large part due to the changing nature of our climate. We are, in fact, in real terms, combating global climate change, whether we want to be combating it or not. And the most frustrating thing I think that I want to share today is that we can do so much better than we are right now. I have three major themes that I'd like to talk about today. I'll do that very briefly. The first is the necessity of revisiting and then passing the major elements of the Build Back Better Act. I understand there are some political concerns. I understand there are some people that have put down their positions. Having been in politics long enough, I know that repackaging and maybe a little bit of negotiation might actually help it get across the finish line. At this point, I don't care what it's called. And if some of the specifics have to be involved, including building a bridge somewhere, as long as we get the green energy jobs and the focus out of that bill, I just want to pass. I think it's past time, quite frankly, for us to do something that bold, that important for our country. The second thing is, I think that one of the challenges we must face and we must find a solution to is that the problem is so big and so omnipresent that people are actually recognizing the impacts of global climate change, but they fall into three categories. Some believe it's too big to fix. We need to help them find a way to at least focus on fixing one small element so they can see progress as we move along. The second is some believe it's not their job. They're focused on other things, and that the world will somehow take care of itself by some magical recipe, and that it's not their job. The third is a group that are actually financially benefiting from the status quo. We have to figure out a way to motivate people to recognize we're in the fight of our lives. We're in the fight for the species survival of our planet. And you either get on the team or you need to find something else to do, because it is our responsibility as human beings to ensure that we pass this planet on to the next generation and the generations that come with at least a possibility of having a livable, meaningful future. The third thing I want to emphasize is that we have the power to change things far beyond, quite frankly, the imaginations of any one person if we choose it. The United States is still the aspirational hub for what people look to for wanting change and wanting people to live up to our better angels of our nature. During World War II, as Debbie mentioned, the United States was able to mobilize in such a way that we were able to transform both our country as well as how wars were fought and how industry was done. I think it's time to recognize we need not just a legislative plan, which we need to pass, but in every state, in every county, in every big city, in every area that is rural, it's time for us as leaders to basically force the question. Are you actually going to be a patriot and stand for a future for our country, or are you going to stand in the way and let our planet die? I think that it is at this point important enough to draw the very clear, bold lines, because we don't have time, quite frankly, for incrementalism at this point. My day job is I teach at Chemeketa Community College, and I look into the eyes of the next generation every day. And while we can't fix everything, we can certainly make significant progress in the next 20 years to make America not just carbon neutral, but perhaps to become a carbon sink, transform our industry, transform the way in which we do business into sustainable energy, and once again, become a light into the darkness. But it's going to take all of us coming together and recognizing the stakes. I believe that today is one of those days where we need to make sure that we hold our Congress, as well as our city councils and everybody in between, accountable, and make sure they understand the stakes are not just following some newfangled science view of the way the world is changing, but quite frankly, whether we want to survive as a species or whether we don't. We are already seeing islands nearly disappearing. We're seeing global climate change and shift to the point that we can't really predict the weather at this point. And we're having people die of heat and other kinds of things that 20 years ago wouldn't have happened. Today, I want to close with just saying thank you for the work of this organization. I hope that we can continue to put a little more pressure on the folks in DC, but more importantly, I believe if we put pressure in our local and regional and states, we can actually force the Congress to recognize that it's in their best interest to finally stand up and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. That's a really good point. There are amazing things happening in the different communities across the United States and the world, frankly, where they've come together to act on the climate crisis and energy independence. And let's hope the folks in Congress and the administration who have taken note of this and are making a difference. All right, I'd like to now go to Kevin Johnson, an Army veteran, White House champion of change, and co-founder of Clean Energy Freedom.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join everyone here. And just want to start off by saying how motivating it is for me to hear our local representatives, speaking just so well on the impacts of both the impacts of climate change in our communities, but also the opportunities for economic development, entrepreneurship, and really leading the way forward. So it really is humbling to join the group here. As noted, my name is Kevin Johnson. I'm an Army veteran, and I got my start in clean energy after my deployment to Iraq in 2004 to 2005. Being stationed just north of where Saddam was captured in the oil refining capital of Iraq in a small town called Beiji, it was hard not to see the impacts to our mission abroad, but also the reason why we're deployed abroad. Watching oil fires burn for a year, it had my soldiers ask me every day, what are we doing here and when are we going home? And what are we doing here? It really opened my eyes up to what I wanted to commit my future career to after the Army. So over the past 15 years, I've worked in the clean energy industry, getting my start in the wind sector, in solar, battery storage, and now working in the e-mobility space. And what I can say from my perspective is that there's tremendous entrepreneurial opportunities. And trudging my way through the industry over the past 15 years has been difficult. But it really makes me proud to see that over 25% of our clean energy workforce today are veterans. There's tens of thousands of veterans like myself working in this clean energy industry. And if we can get our Congress and our Senate to move forward on this Build Back Better bill, it would unlock tremendous amount of economic opportunity for veterans and across our country. I'm very proud to be part of the Clean Energy Freedom campaign. This campaign has brought together veterans like myself, national security leaders, as well as some celebrities that have reach beyond someone like myself to really communicate out to Americans via their platforms about the opportunities in this clean energy economy moving forward, not just focusing on the impacts of climate, which are great, but really focusing on the opportunities out there. We're really proud through that campaign to work with the administration to move forward with the Defense Production Act, which was noted earlier. Very proud that the president has shown his leadership on June 6th to invoke the Defense Production Act to compel the production of clean energy technologies like solar, heat pumps, as well as other critical technologies. Now it's Congress's turn It's Congress's time, and it's long past time for the Congress to move forward on the Build Back Better bill. If passed, and I'm confident that we will see movement on that bill over this next few, hopefully, weeks and or in a few days and weeks. If and when passed, the opportunities are absolutely incredible for veterans like myself to create the industries of the future. It's imperative. It's both a national security imperative, as well as an economic imperative to move this bill forward. And I call on Congress to move it forward today. Alex, thank you for the opportunity to join you today.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. And your experience too, working with veterans in the clean energy sector. It's inspiring to see that clean energy is now cheaper in 2/3 of the world than fossil fuels. And this is the way things are going. The only issue is it's not going fast enough to make a meaningful difference to keep us energy independent and secure. So this is why we've got to see Congress take action. All right, so we're going to Supervisor Mike Turner of London County, Air Force veteran and EOP National Leadership Council member.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. I'm Mike Turner. I'm the Ashburn supervisor here in Loudoun County, Virginia. And we're doing a lot of stuff here locally. Since I've been in office for about two and a half years, one of the very first things we did was create an environmental commission. It's a robust citizens commission that is examining all aspects of the environmental and the climate change crisis here locally in Loudoun County, with an eye towards what kinds of local programs that we can implement. Recognizing that one of the key ways that we can have that effect, to the best effect in our own local area, is electric vehicles. We're in the process right now of converting the entire county vehicle fleet to electric, and examining the best way to do that. We're also involved. I'm on the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and we're involved in zero emission bus programs across Northern Virginia. So we're recognizing the kinds of things that we can do here locally. I'm personally a staunch advocate of municipal aggregation or community choice aggregation, whereby the county can hire a third-party provider and under contract deliver. And we've actually had a consultant, that was one of our first things we did, report back that we could offer 100% zero carbon energy by 2024, going to the Northeastern energy market, and delivering that with the data center community here in Loudoun County, which is the largest concentration of data centers in the world. We have 152 data centers in Loudoun County. They are enormous consumers of fossil fuel energy, and they are anxious to move to zero carbon energy. So municipal aggregation, we would be the biggest model in the country if we implemented it. Municipal aggregation has a huge impact. And I heard an idea the other day. I'm also the chair of the Transportation Land Use Committee, and somebody suggested, why do we simply require all new gas stations in Loudoun County to offer high-speed charging stations? The proposal was to not allow any more gas stations in Loudoun County and only allow high-speed charging stations, which I thought was great, maybe a little radical to get off the ground. So I suggested, why don't we implement an ordinance here in the county that requires any new gas station to have as many spots with high-speed charging stations as they do gas pumps. So if you have 9 gas pumps, you need to offer 9 parking spots with 9 high-speed chargers at the gas station. And I can tell you, as an electric vehicle owner, I'm constantly in search of where to go charge my vehicle. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing at the local level. And I am struck by the fact that to a large degree, we're doing this at the county level almost in isolation. I don't know that we have a headwind, but we certainly don't have a tailwind, as long as the federal government can't mount a really coherent national effort to move us to energy independence and to address climate change. The portions of the Build Back Better Act that address this would be absolutely instrumental. $500 billion directed towards climate change initiatives. We just implemented a lot of the funding that came out of the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funding. And it was a perfect example of what the local government can do when it has a tailwind of full and robust and full-throated federal endorsement, not just verbally, but with hard dollars behind them, and give us the opportunity to channel those dollars to local programs that are having a real impact. And we could do the same thing. The Defense Production Act is a start. $500 million is not that much, but at least it's a nod. It kind of reinforces how absolutely critical the midterm elections are in November and in 2024. I know that I look at every candidate, regardless of party, and find out where they stand on climate change. And that is a huge influencer on my vote. We can talk about the gridlock in Congress all day long, but until we change Congress, that gridlock's not going to go away. And as a county official, I can tell you, we really, really like it when we're working together as a full functioning integrated team, federal, state, and local, in the same direction. And I know that we can do this, but the opportunities we have here on the ground locally are really manifest. And if we could just get a big push from the federal government to get behind these kinds of initiatives, I think it would make just a huge difference. And so I really appreciate EOPA and the work that we're doing. I'm proud to be on the board, and I'm excited when we get a chance to voice our concerns. I think I've mentioned in prior meetings that my first Air Force assignment was as an air rescue pilot in Thule, Greenland, with 600 miles from the North Pole. The Greenland ice cap was 2 miles thick at the time. And there are now stories where there are areas of the Greenland landmass that have never been exposed to sunlight that are now open because the ice cap has melted down all the way to the tundra level. That's the level of climate change that's taken place since 1974 when I was in Greenland. So it's pretty shocking. We really do need to get on the same page at all governmental levels. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. So thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you, Supervisor Turner. Unfortunately, what you saw visually there is playing out in many catastrophic ways across the world. And so what you're doing locally, being leveraged by the federal funds, that's a great example of how we can make solutions together jointly and lead the world in it, frankly. All right, so we're going to go next to Mayor Derek Wood. He's the mayor of town of Dumfries, Virginia, and a Marine Corps veteran. All right. Mayor Wood, are you with us?
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I was having technical difficulties trying to work from a cell phone. But nonetheless, I mean, definitely great commentary for all my colleagues. I think one of the things we all have in common as veterans, we all made the pledge to protect our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I believe that the environmental crisis and what we're seeing is one of those enemies that's both foreign and domestic. And I think us being able to find some sensible solution. I am the mayor of probably the oldest continuously chartered town in the state of Virginia, the town of Dumfries, Virginia. And we were found, ironically, why were we, I always like to ask people, why were we the oldest continuously chartered towns? Because we were founded on a body of water called Quantico Creek that sat off of the Potomac River. Now, over time, because of the poor farming practices that they had from plucking and picking tobacco and also drawing the iron nutrients out of that body of water, we begin to lose our harbor, our deep water harbor, which made us then really become economically depressed. And so Dumfries then no longer became relevant, and we became kind of economically depressed. We were no longer destination Dumfries, as I like to call us, as we're coming back to. And it was because of we see the nutrients and everything that kind of silted in our body of water that made us a deep water harbor that historically rivaled New York, it rivaled Boston, it rivaled Philadelphia during that time as far as the tonnage of tobacco and stuff that went out of there. Fast forward to somewhere around the 60s or 70s, we got a major problem in Dumfries with a power plant that came to town, and they filled up these coal ash ponds, right? And so coal ash has become a major problem and a concern that we are now in the process of coming to a solution. One of the proposals that I know that we're an advocate for in the town of Dumfries, and I think even Dominion is to have the simple fact that we have to have solar. We're looking at being able to put a bunch of solar farms up there in order to provide solution and alternative energy versus that coal ash. So to really repurpose what that has been used for and to do those type of things. Some of the other things I'm doing here locally that I think is really helping the power grid and us to do our part locally. I talked about it earlier before we started the press conference is being able to figure out how we can do sustainable things like create bathrooms in our parks that's totally off the grid. And so we first put the first bathroom off the grid that operates completely off of rainwater, solar power, and there's like something underground where all of the waste goes on and seals it in. And it's a much nicer attraction than a porta potty, and it still keeps everything kind of off the grid and naturally sustainable. I think that and I urge, the decision makers to really invoke not just the what they've already done for us with Defense Production Act, but to let's look at the Build Back Better America. Let's look at the funding that's available. If we can actually increase, I know for us, because we're a historic community, that we can find ways to dredge our waterways, that we can find ways to add more money. I love the idea and definitely attach myself to every new gas station that opens up to having electric charging stations, right? We know there's a lot of funding available for electric vehicle charging stations and a lot of people looking for solutions and those type of things. And I am definitely open to those opportunities right here in the town of Dumfries and in our community as well. And really, I look for as well as people who have those clean energy type of policies to be really effective. And I've been really fighting to make Dumfries that deep water harbor again. And trust me, the way this, we know that there is a climate issue with the record heats we've gotten over here the last couple of weeks getting into June. Today isn't one of those days, but we've had temperatures that if you were standing outside on the concrete, I know my car at one set read 99 degrees, and I know it was 110 degrees outside when you stand on there. So we definitely see that we're getting record levels of heat. So there's something going on with the environment. I know that if we're not scientists, scientists can tell us that that is happening. So definitely wanted to share and attach myself to all the comments of my colleagues around the nation.
Thank you, Mayor Wood. And since I know you're a culinary expert, sadly, we have such a heat wave and that someone actually cooked a cheeseburger on the pavement or on their car, actually, in the Southwest. So let's hope that we leave that to your expertise and not
environment.
If anyone doesn't know, he's an expert barbecue. So if you're ever in Dumfries, Destination Dumfries.
Let me tell you, with the way the heat was this weekend, I just barbecued in front of Congress on Pennsylvania Avenue this weekend. We had the DC barbecue battle. And what I saw out there, Alex, as well, because of this heat wave, we saw a number of people get heat exhaustion. And you know the signs of that because people were throwing up, people were getting dizzy, they were getting nauseated. And that's a result of the amount of heat that was coming off. But I think to say the asphalt adds, another 10 degrees of people standing on that asphalt than what the environment is. So we saw that. And I kind of stood in the grill and took it because, I'm already acclimated to the heat and to the weather. We have cold weather training. I guess I get hot weather training by barbecuing on the grill all year long.
No, that's a really serious point, though, is that the number one killer from climate is heat. It's and people don't realize that because it's not something that's a flashy like $1 billion storm. We've had 20-something $1 billion storms, but sadly, the thing that's killing most people is heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So this is something that's going to be increasingly important, desperate, particularly as a population shift. We have 50 million people who've been displaced in many ways because of climate disasters, particularly heat, floods, water. And if we don't address this from a security and economics perspective, our military is going to be extremely busy, and it's going to hurt the international security of the world. So with that, what we need, we're going to transition to the Q&A section here for a couple minutes. And if you would like to ask a question on camera, please just flag and I can bring you in, or our team can bring you into the conversation, or just put your question in the Q&A and I'll ask it to our guests here. And I do see a couple of questions that have popped up already. And it looks like, to summarize some of them, there's a lot of questions on infrastructure here, like clean energy infrastructure. And a couple focus particularly on vehicles. So looking at how optimistic you are, Build Back Better plan, can it happen? And what's the biggest changes to law that need to be enacted, right? And how can we change our infrastructure that is suited to combat climate change? So I'm going to compass that kind of into one question, where we look at what do you guys think needs to happen as a priority, locally or federally, when it comes to building out the clean energy infrastructure to make us more secure? Is it clean vehicles, or is it all of the above? I'll toss it out actually to Kevin, because I know you have to leave first.
Yeah, Alex, thank you for that. And I think, embedded in that question is, what is the probability of the Build Back Better being passed, given that, it failed, pretty dramatically before Christmas. It was very, very close to getting across the line at that time. It's difficult to read where Senator Manchin is on any given day, but I think one thing that we do recognize, that Senator Manchin is very supportive of our veterans, especially our veterans in transition. And I think one of the key points that our group and others are continuing to make to Senator Manchin is the number of jobs to be created that can support veterans across the country, as well as in West Virginia. My previous company, we owned a very large wind farm in West Virginia and have development of battery storage development efforts in West Virginia. So markets like West Virginia are also critical development opportunities, and one of which I know that others are making a clear case to Senator Manchin on a regular basis. As far as where the investment needs to be made, I think it is cliche to say to all the above, but I think in the power generation sector, I think one clear thing we're seeing is the opportunity to really move to a distributed generation model, away from centralized utilities and large transmission buildouts. The opportunity to create solar power and store that power using battery storage locally, whether it be through aggregated demand, like the supervisor mentioned, or as well as on rooftop solar opportunities. So I think solar installation at distributed level is a key area. As well, on the mobility side, the electric vehicle infrastructure is a critical one to really take as much carbon emissions off the roads as possible. So I think it should be an interesting path forward, and I'm very excited on the pathway, and hopeful that Congress moves the bill across the line.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to jump into that question before we go to the next one?
I'll jump in real quick, Alex. All I know is what we're doing in New Mexico. We are building our infrastructure thanks to all the money coming from Washington, and New Mexico is primed for wind and solar. And we're looking at hydrogen. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be green hydrogen, so that's going to extend fossil fuels. So that's something we're pushing back against very hard. But we do have the solar and wind, the geothermal. There's so many things we can do in New Mexico. We just have to keep working at it and making sure that we are using the money given to us wisely to make sure this gets done. But and transition away from our fossil fuels, because we are so highly dependent on fossil fuels in New Mexico. We are transitioning. We've brought in the film industry. We've done a whole bunch of different ways to bring in different types of jobs and to hopefully soon move away from our dependence on fossil fuels. Thank you, Alex.
Great.
Alex, this is Mike Turner, real quick. One of the things with the Build Back Better, it's really easy to fall into the trap of wringing our hands over what could be or what should be. We can't ever lose sight of the fact that we got to roll up our sleeves to deal with what is. One of the things I've discovered with county government is it's really pretty amazing. It's the best job I've ever had. I just love it because you can have an idea and just go, gee, let's do that. Let's try that. And we may get some pushback. Well, okay, we'll deal with the pushback as we get it. So it can be pretty depressing to try and think, will the Build Back Better climate change features get passed? I don't know. I sure hope they do. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they get passed. But it's also pretty exciting to be able to make incremental change here on the ground in our community. And so that there's a lot of opportunity there. So we shouldn't ever lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of things that we can do locally, and if, collectively that can really add up to an awful lot.
Yeah, kind of as a follow on to that, there's one question that says, was your gas station idea popular in your area? And kind of throwing that out to the broader crowd too. When you put these solutions forward, do people receive them, your constituents? Are they appreciative, or is it get a lot of resistance?
Well, you just never know. You just never know until you put it out there. I actually got an email from a Loudoun County resident on Friday suggesting the gas station idea with the charging stations. So I haven't done anything with it yet, but I've already talked to my staff, and I will introduce what we call a board member initiative to change the ordinance. Now, that's when you start to, when you start to kick over rocks, that's when you start to see what's underneath. When I actually propose an ordinance change, I'm sure I'm going to get heard from the gas station community. I don't know that I'm going to hear from the development community, because if you're building a gas station from the ground up, you can build it any way you want to. And I know I'm going to get big kudos from the environmental community here in Loudoun County. So you don't really know where it's going to sit. This one was kind of interesting to me because it doesn't restrain gas stations from doing what they're doing now. It simply requires them to do something substantive in the other direction. And I'll be interested to see what kind of pushback I get. But I think it's a great idea, and so we're gonna try it, and I'll report back on our next radio conference how it went over.
Yeah, Los Angeles is already in that process too, I think. Well, I know. So broadly too, the great thing is when you look at the polling, most Americans want this, right? They want clean energy. They want the diversification of our energy systems. And they want to fight climate change because they understand, and it's never been so much clearer than now, how much of a security threat is given our dependence on fossil fuels and autocratic nations like Russia using it to their advantage. Right. So let's see, let's go to the next question here. Well, this is kind of a broad one, I guess. So you can take it where you guys would like it. What are the biggest changes to law that need to be enacted for the US to become a carbon sink? What steps do we need to take? So is there an idea or step that you guys have been passionate about that could make us more energy independent and secure?
I take that. If you think of what Supervisor Turner said earlier, he talked about the amount of data centers that's coming, especially in this Northern Virginia area. I think one of the things we can require for every data center that there be some type of solar farm that goes along with it somehow, right? To really take, because those data centers are very draining in taxes. So I would propose, I think there should be some local laws that mandate or allow for something like that to get some of that off the line.
Mm-hmm. Great. And we got another question. Can public investments such as pedestrianized streets and mass transit be just as efficient as clean vehicles and achieving energy independence? Anyone want to jump into that? I do know from our experience working with lawmakers across the US, it's all and above, right? Because cars are part of the American culture. They're going to be here for a while. And it's unbelievably important to increase the pedestrian access to everything, unbelievably, for our community's safety and bringing them together. But at the same time, vehicles are part of the American spirit in many ways, right? So we've got to figure out how to electrify the vehicle and the fleets and infrastructure as fast as possible. And only 12% of people buy new cars generally. So the incentives in the Build Back Better reiteration plan right now are substantial to be able to allow access and equitably access to clean transportation. Otherwise, we're going to have this gap between who can afford it and who can't. That's another reason why it's so important that we see the not just tax credits, but rebates. So nonprofits and other institutions can invest in clean energy infrastructure as well. And going along with that, ensuring that we have the car standards, right? California did it, and now the federal government's got to follow lead.
Alex,
right, so,
it's Mike again, real quick.
Please.
The one thing that we can do, I think we have to deal with the oil industry. We just got to tackle that head on. And I don't know that an adversarial relationship is the answer, but I think the answer is the free market, and we've got to figure out a way to incentivize alternatives to fossil fuels. Electric vehicles, zero emission buses for our transit lines, those kinds of things. I have thought in the last week or two, go ahead, guys, keep charging $5 a gallon for gasoline. I would love to see if there's a pretty significant spike in electric vehicle purchases a year or two from now as a result of $5 a gallon gasoline. You may be getting some windfall profits right now, but over the long term, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. And to the extent that we can incentivize people to move to electric vehicles, I think that would be a huge impact.
Yeah. Particularly if the miles per gallon standards, to put it in a simple way, along with the prices, along with the incentives, that could really transform our transportation ability. And just, I know you have an electric car, they're better in every way. I mean, the lower center of gravity, the performance, I mean, it's pretty amazing. All right, so we're gonna go to any last thoughts here with the questions. I apologize, we're probably not getting to every detailed question here, but if you have a question or follow on, please do reach out to me and our team, and we'll connect you with one of the lawmakers or individuals who are speaking here and get you an answer as well. So this is a kind of a long one, but goes along with our theme here. We're looking at EV and energy independence. Does the DOE have opportunities to directly to local governments for infrastructure dollars? So essentially, as DOE, I mean, $7.5 billion is going for infrastructure, transportation, but looking at it on a bigger scale, what collaborations do you guys think the question meant at EOPA, but I would throw it out there, collaborations between state and federal and others to achieve these goals, and the business community as well. If anyone would like to jump in with a story we see a success or something like that. And so I can answer the question a bit with, does EOPA have regional collaborators among officials? Absolutely, yes. Please get in contact with us. We work with a tremendous amount of C3, C4, and other organizations out there that with Clean Energy for America and Energy Freedom. Debbie, if you want to chat about any of the infrastructure changes for clean energy in your state as we round it out, just give you the last word here.
Sure. We, like I said before, we are primed for more solar, wind, and geothermal. Heat pumps are starting to be big in New Mexico. We just added electric buses in Albuquerque. We are looking at, and we're looking at EV charging stations in some of our, because we have 2 freeways that go through our state, in some of our cities, our little towns that are dying out, and putting electric stations there to revitalize the town. So we're working hard on getting, moving away from fossil fuel, but it's just tough. And we're doing our best, and we're working hard, and we're giving incentives, and we're bringing in more electric vehicles. We're trying. So that's what we're doing in New Mexico. And it's just a big push to get rid of our dependence on fossil fuel. And I think this press conference is one way to make sure everybody understands that climate change is real, and we have to move away from fossil fuels, even in New Mexico, no matter how dependent we are. That move. So thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Again, if you'd like any follow-up questions, please reach out. Our information is on the press release, and we will be